There is a silence beneath all noise, a silence more ancient than any scripture, more sacred than any temple, more true than the words of man. In this silence, two great lights once walked the earth, two mirrors of the eternal, two teachers not bound by time. They came from different lands, wore different robes, spoke in different tongues, but their hearts beat to the same rhythm, not the rhythm of culture or creed, but of truth. The Buddha, the awakened one, who turned inward and found a path beyond all suffering. And Jesus, the anointed one, who gave his life for love, and spoke in parables of a kingdom not of this world. Different, yes, but at their core, startlingly aligned. Not in dogma, but in essence. Not in form, but in freedom. Both spoke of a way, not a belief. A way of being. A way of waking up from the dream of separation. The illusion of ego. The disease of more, they whispered to those with ears to hear. The kingdom is not coming. It is already here. Not out there, but within you. Both men were born into suffering. Not merely the cries of childbirth, but the world's aching thirst. A thirst for permanence in a world of change. A thirst for control in a world of chaos. A thirst for love in a world built on fear. And both offered water. Living water. Still water. The Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree, unmoving, unflinching, until all illusions dissolved. Until the wheel of becoming stopped spinning. Until the self was seen for what it was. A story. A shadow. A flame that feeds on craving. Jesus walked the desert, fasting, tempted, stripped bare, until the voice within him thundered louder than the voices without. Until the devil of desire was cast out. Until he emerged not as a preacher, but a presence. They were not gods to be worshipped, but examples to be followed. Living, breathing maps to the unnameable. Both taught that the way out is in. That the path is narrow, not because few are chosen, but because few choose to let go. Let go of identity, of fear, of the aching need to be someone. The Buddha said, all things are impermanent. Jesus said, do not store up treasures on earth. Different words, same lightning. What dies is not just the body, but the masks, the images. The false selves we build like sandcastles, hoping they will outlast the tide. But the tide always comes. The Buddha smiled. Jesus wept. But both knew attachment is the root of suffering. Whether to pleasure or pain, success or sorrow, wealth or poverty. It is not what we hold, but that we hold. And so they taught release. Not apathy, but presence. Not detachment, but sacred, non-clinging. The Buddha called it nirvana, the extinguishing of the flame of craving. Jesus called it the kingdom of God, where the last are first, and the meek inherit the earth. Different names for the same silence. They both walked with eyes wide open, not blinded by tradition or clouded by ideology. They saw into the heart of things, where there is no Jew or Gentile, no Brahmin or untouchable, no saved, no damned, no holy, no profane. Just this moment, unfolding, perfect in its imperfection. They taught true stories, not to fill your mind, but to break it, to wake you, to unsettle the false ground you stand on. Be like the lilies of the field, Jesus said. They do not toil, yet they are clothed in glory. Let go of all views, the Buddha said. They are snares. Both pointed to the same moon. But how many of us stare at the finger? We built temples in their names, but they lived without walls. We created doctrines and rituals, but they walked in silence. We made them idols, but they broke the idols within. You were never meant to worship them. You were meant to become them. That is the radical truth. That is the terrifying, liberating invitation. To die before you die, and see that there is no death. To give up the world, and inherit the present. to burn every map and find yourself already home. The Buddha spoke of the middle way, not asceticism, not indulgence, but balance. The still point in the turning world. Jesus spoke of the narrow gate, the path not taken by the crowd, but walked in solitude, lit by inner fire. Both paths require courage, not the courage to fight, but the courage to surrender, to kneel not to a god, but to the unknown, to trust the groundless, to fall into now. Look around. The world is burning, with greed, hatred, delusion, with hurry and hunger and hollowness. We are louder than ever and more lost. We consume, but are not nourished. We scroll, but do not see. We reach, but do not touch. The Buddha's silence would shatter us. Jesus' gaze would undo us, because they would see through us, past our roles and labels and avatars, into the aching child beneath, still searching for home. But home is not a place, it is a presence. They both knew heaven is not after death. Enlightenment is not after lifetimes. It is here, now, in this breath. Are you listening? The teachings were never about belief. They were about being. Being empty enough to be filled. Being still enough to hear the whisper beneath the noise. The Buddha said, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Jesus said, let those who have ears hear. This is the sound of awakening. Not in thunder, but in stillness. Not in miracles, but in seeing clearly. You don't need more answers. You need fewer lies. Strip away what you are not, and what remains is sacred. You were born whole before you were named, before you were taught, before you were praised or punished, broken or molded. You came into this world as pure awareness, without judgment, without fear, without ambition. You knew how to cry when hurting, and laugh without reason. You knew how to be here, fully, freely. But then came the world, and it told you who to be, what to want, what to fear, what to hide. And slowly, brick by brick, you built a house of self, a mask to wear, a story to tell. I am this, I am not that. I must succeed. I must be seen. I must be better, or else I am nothing. And you called it me. The Buddha saw through this illusion. He did not merely see suffering, he saw its root. Not in pain, but in clinging. Not in loss, but in identification. And so he taught not to fix the self, but to let it unravel. Jesus too walked this razor's edge. He shattered the expectation. He flipped tables in temples. He dined with the outcast and forgave the condemned. Not because he was defiant, but because he saw beyond role, beyond righteousness, beyond appearances. He said, you must lose your life to find it. Not your pulse, but your persona. Both knew that the ego cannot be enlightened, only relinquished. They were not selling comfort. They were calling you to die to everything false. To awaken is not to add more. It is to subtract, until there is nothing left but truth. This is not the way of the crowd. It is not loud. It does not promise fame. It is not viral. It is the way of the seed underground. The way of the moon in still water. The way of the silent monk and the barefoot wanderer. It is the way of deep seeing and deeper surrender. You want to be free, then learn to sit with what is. Not fix it, not numb it, but sit. In the fire, in the ache, in the silence. Watch the waves of thought rise and fall. Without grabbing, without pushing. Watch the storm pass. Watch yourself not disappear, but dissolve. And what remains is not nothing. It is the everything that needed no name. The Buddha said, there is no self. Jesus said, I and the Father are one. Both were pointing to the same absence, the end of separation. Not the erasing of identity, but the seeing through it. The seeing that the wave was never separate from the ocean. that the breath was never separate from the sky. This is not philosophy. This is liberation, and liberation costs everything. Everything false. You cannot carry your pride into the kingdom. You cannot carry your resentment into nirvana. You must drop it all, not to become better, but to become nobody. And in being nobody, you are free, no longer trapped in comparison, no longer chained to out, no longer hungry for validation. You simply are, like the wind, like the stars, like love. Jesus said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." The Buddha taught purification of mind through mindfulness, right action, compassion, equanimity, different steps, same mountain. Both paths lead inward, not to isolation, but to union, not with dogma, but with direct experience. Jesus wandered hillsides to pray alone. The Buddha wandered forests to meditate. They knew the outer noise must quiet, so the inner truth may speak. And it does not speak in thunder. It whispers through the rustle of leaves, through the crack in your voice, through the longing behind your ambition, through the moment you finally let go. They never asked you to be perfect. They asked you to be present, to be still, to be real. This is the sacred work, to return, not to childhood, but to essence, not to belief, but to awareness, not to the past, but to now. And now is enough. It has always been. You don't need to become. You need to remember. The Buddha said, "You are your own master. The truth is within you." Jesus said, "The kingdom of God is within you, not after death, not in a far-off land, not granted by another, but now, here, this breath." The miracle was never walking on water. It was being awake on land, fully here, fully human, fully divine. Both men suffered, both bled, both were rejected by the very world they tried to free. Not because they were wrong, but because truth threatens illusion, because silence threatens control, because love threatens power. But they did not retaliate. They did not hate. They did not cling. They forgave. They released. They transcended. This is strength, not of fists, but of stillness, not of dominance, but of clarity, not of victory, but of surrender. You want to be strong? Then sit with your pain. See it clearly, feel it fully, and don't become it. Watch your thoughts like clouds, your emotions like rivers. Let them pass, and see what does not pass. That is you, not the voice in your head, but the awareness hearing it. Not the roles you play, but the being that plays them. Not the story, the silence between the lines. And in that silence, you will hear the same truth, spoken by different tongues. Let go, be still, awaken. The Buddha never claimed monopoly on truth. Neither did Jesus, because truth needs no trademark, no religion, no label. It only needs your courage to see, to stay, to surrender. And what is left when you surrender? Not emptiness, not void, but fullness beyond form, peace beyond peace. The kind of peace that does not need circumstances to align, that does not depend on praise or pleasure or promises kept, but simply is. A stillness that watches pain without drowning. A clarity that sees death and does not tremble. A presence so vast, it welcomes all things. Joy, grief, even the end. This is what both the Buddha and Jesus offered. Not escape but freedom. Not hope for a better world, but awakening in this one. You don't need a miracle. You don't need to fix your past, rewrite your story, earn forgiveness. You only need to look now, with still eyes, with a quiet mind. And in that gaze, the truth will rise like the sun, effortless, inevitable, already here. The Buddha taught mindfulness, not a trend, not a productivity hack, but the art of being, seeing each thought arise, each feeling pass, without gripping, without turning away. Jesus taught the same through love, a love that does not choose, that embraces the leper and the liar, that pours itself out without asking if it will be returned. Mindfulness is love in silence. Love is mindfulness in motion. Both lead to the same place, the end of resistance, the end of war within. Because all war begins inside, between the part of you that clings and the part that longs to fly. Between the mask and the mirror. You wear so many names, so many shields. You were taught to defend your story, but never taught to question it. Who are you when no one is looking? When nothing is left to prove? Who are you in the quiet between your thoughts? That is where they both pointed. Not to a heaven above, not to a rebirth to come, but to the groundless ground beneath your feet. This eternal now. The Buddha called it Tathata. Suchness. This. Only this. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Not meaning his flesh, but this presence, alive in anyone who dares to die to themselves. The path is not far, but it is narrow. So narrow you cannot carry your past through. So narrow, even your name must be left behind. You keep asking for the map, but the map is not the territory, and the only step is this one. Now, inhale, feel it. This is it. Exhale, let it go. Again, now you are free. Again, now you are home. The Buddha taught right view, right thought, right speech, right action. Not as commandments, but as alignment, as harmony with the deep rhythm of life. Jesus said, by their fruits you shall know them. Not by belief, not by words, but by presence. Do your actions come from fear or love, from ego or awareness, from clinging or clarity? This is how you know if you're awake. Not by how much you know, but how much you let go. Look around. The world does not need more opinions. It does not need more cleverness or control. It needs more being, more stillness, more people who live from within. You don't need to convert. You don't need to change your label. You don't need to become a Buddhist or a Christian. You only need to become real. Strip away what is false. Feel what is true. And live it fiercely, humbly, freely. Both men knew their message would be misunderstood. Because the truth does not fit into systems. It threatens them. The Buddha was asked, are you a god? He said no. A prophet? No. Then what are you? I am awake. Jesus was asked, who are you? He answered, before Abraham was, I am. They were not describing a personality. They were naming the nameless, the I am behind all masks. Not personal identity, but universal presence. That is what you are. That is what you've always been. Under the noise, behind the striving, beneath the fear. Wake up. Not tomorrow, not after more seeking, not when the pain goes away. Now. This is the revolution they offered. Not of governments or armies, but of hearts. A revolution of stillness, of inner fire, of clarity that sees through the lies of the world and loves anyway. The Buddha taught compassion, not as sentiment, but as seeing. Seeing clearly that there is no other, that all suffering is our own. Jesus said, love your enemies, not because it's nice, but because hatred binds you to what you hate, and love sets you free. Their love was not soft. It was fierce. Fierce enough to walk into suffering and not flinch. Fierce enough to speak truth to power and not bow. Fierce enough to forgive the ones who drove the nails. That is not weakness. That is the strength of one who knows who they are. Do you, or are you still chasing the next thing? The next status, next answer, next escape? Pause. Everything you need is already here. Everything they spoke of already inside you, not as potential, but as presence. You don't need to become the Buddha. You don't need to become Jesus. You only need to remember what they remembered, that this moment is the gate. This breath is the teacher. This silence is the truth. Listen. Can you hear it? The stillness that was there before your first memory. The space between thoughts. The silence behind the heartbeat. That silence is not empty. It is alive. It is what you are. The Buddha found it beneath the Bodhi tree. Jesus embodied it in the Garden of Solitude. And you have touched it too, in fleeting moments. Between the rise and fall of wanting, in the peace after surrender, in the quiet after tea, in the vastness you glimpse when the story stopped. You have not lost it. You only turned away. Now turn back, not toward effort, but toward stillness. Not toward becoming, but toward being. This is the final letting go, the death of seeking, the death of the seeker, and in that death, life begins. Not the life of accumulation, achievement, image, but life unfiltered, unowned, undivided. Jesus called it rebirth. The Buddha called it liberation. Words fail. What matters is the seeing, that you are not separate, not from others, not from the sky, not from the source. And when you see that clearly, compassion is no longer a virtue. It is your nature. You will not need to try to love. You will be loved. You will not need to forgive, because there is no longer a you to be hurt. The walls will fall, and what remains is simple, is vast, is home. The world may never understand you. That's not your burden. The world crucified Jesus. The world ignored the Buddha. But truth does not need applause. It only needs to be lived. So live it. Breathe without clinging. Speak without defending. Act without agenda. Love without demand. And when fear comes, let it. When grief comes, feel it. When loss arrives, open your. Because nothing is lost. Nothing real can be taken from you. The body will fall. The name will fade. But what you are was never born and will never die. You are the space in which it all arises. The stillness beneath the symphony. The light behind the form. This is what the Buddha realized. What Jesus lived. Not as an idea, but as a truth so intimate. It cannot be spoken, only pointed to. Only lived. So live as if you have already died, as if you have nothing left to prove, as if this moment is the only one you were ever given, because it is. And in that moment, walk, not to arrive, but to be. Walk through this world with open eyes, noticing the light as it strikes a leaf, the breath as it fills your chest, the stranger's face as it mirrors your own. Be so still that even your shadow begins to rest. Be so present that time forgets your name. Be so free that no one can follow. They will ask who you are. They will try to define you. Let them. You are not here to be understood. You are here to burn with truth, with silence, with love. Not the love that needs, the love that is. And when you speak, let it be from stillness. And when you act, let it be from clarity. And when you rest, let it be complete. Because that is the convergence, not in doctrine, not in ritual, but in the silent flowering of awakened presence. Two men, two paths, one truth, that you are already whole, already home, already free. You always were. So now, lay it all down, not just your past, but your future, not just your story, but yourself, and be still, and listen, and know, I am.